All right, good evening, everybody. I'd like to call the July 13th meeting of the Dartmouth School Committee Equality and Diversity Subcommittee meeting to order. Per an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, the public will not be allowed to physically access this Diversity and Equity Committee meeting. Members of the public can access the meeting via live stream at youtube.com/Dartmouth DHS TV Media. I hope I got that right. Mr. Tebow can correct me. I'm reading from a different script that had the DCTV link in there. The school committee reserves the right to implement additional remote participation procedures and will notify the public of these procedures as soon as possible. So to start off the meeting, because we are meeting remotely, all of our votes have to be taken by roll call. So I'll just do a roll call to ensure that everyone is recorded as present. Kelly Bloom.
Yes, here.
Lily Chamberlain.
Here.
Diane Massari.
Here.
Mark Hayes.
Here.
Ross Tebow.
Here.
Shelley Scott.
Here.
Elizabeth Murphy.
Here.
Kathleen Amaral.
Here.
Jada Walker.
Here.
Thank you, Jada. And just so everyone knows, Jada mentioned she had to borrow a computer because we let her know at the last minute. So that's Jada under Amy there. Julina is not here, and I am here, Shannon Jenkins. All right, so we have 3 items on our agenda tonight. One is just approval of minutes. The second is discussion of sort of our next steps. And then we've added in other matters that may not have been anticipated at time of the agenda posting, cover other things potentially. Let's start with the approval of the minutes. I apologize that I sent those out late. Thank you to Ms. Murphy for reminding me that I forgot to actually send those to you. That was my mistake. Dr. Gifford had sent them to me, I think maybe like the day after the meeting was done. So I'm sorry that that fell through the cracks. That having been said, would you all feel comfortable approving the minutes tonight? And if so, I would entertain a motion for approval, and then we can discuss whether or not we should postpone it or not. So would anybody be willing to move approval?
Motion to approve the minutes from June 22nd.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Tebow. All right, so now we can sort of discuss, does everybody feel comfortable with approving these minutes tonight, or do you want to wait till the next meeting? If anybody wants to voice objection, that's fine with me. I know I sent them out a little bit late.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Ms. Amaral.
I don't have anything relative to not voting or not. I just have a question. I was unable to make last meeting. Would it be appropriate for me to abstain as I was
If you
one
prefer,
of the 7
that's
viewers?
Yeah, that's often what happened. I know that you were watching it on YouTube. If you feel comfortable voting, it's totally up to you.
Okay, I do. Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, any further discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, we'll have to do a roll call again. Ms. Bloom, do yes or no to approval of the minutes?
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Chamberlain, I will also note you can abstain if you would like. That's the third alternative. Ms. Chamberlain.
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Massari.
Yes.
Mr. Hayes.
Yes.
Mr. Tebow.
Yes.
Ms. Scott.
Yes.
Ms. Murphy.
Yes.
Ms. Amaral.
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Walker.
Yes.
Okay, and I will also vote yes. Okay, so that motion carries unanimously. So at our last meeting, we had some informational presentations, right, where we learned some information. And then we took some time off to so we could all sort of think about and read more and learn. I'll also say I think it's the intention of the committee to be open and fair to the public. And so we didn't want to make any decisions or votes without sort of publicly posting that on the agenda, which is why we have come back here on the 13th to sort of start that conversation about what we would like to have on the next steps. Before we start talking about that, I do want to acknowledge, I think you all received a few letters today. One was from Miss Cheryl Andrews Multias, who's the chairwoman of the Gay Head Wampanoag. And the other was from Mr. Andrews, Mr. Pereira, and Mr. Ventura. All members of the committee should have received copies of those emails. If you did not, please let me know. I will ensure that everyone gets a copy of that. Okay, so not everyone did. All right, so Ms. Scott, you had raised your hand. Did you receive either of those or neither of them?
Neither of them.
Okay, let me check my email real quick because I thought it went out to everyone, but perhaps they did not. They might have just gone out to the school committee. I will forward all of those to you. Let's see. Okay, so one of them should have gone to you. It would have come from a Proton email account. You might have missed that. That attached to that was the letter from the chair of the Gay Head Wampanoag. I had emailed her and asked for her permission to forward it to all of you because I don't forward people's emails without their permission. So that's the way that one would have come to you all. You might have perhaps missed that. But I do see, I think, at least it looks like the school members. It may be that Miss Scott, I'm going to send that to you, and Ms. Murphy did not get those, and Ms. Walker, and Ms. Pamphile. I'm sorry, I'm talking while I'm typing here. So I'm going to send that one to you. I think they may have used the directory. So you should now have received the that first one. I'm looking at the email for the second one. Again, it looks like members of the schools received those. With the exception of the students. So I'm just, give me one more second.
Can you, could you send those to me as well? I also didn't receive them.
All right, I will also send those to you. It looks like everyone else is on there. Did anyone else not receive them?
Madam Chair, I did. I just to alert everyone, the one that we often get these, they come from this like app, Proton Mail. They're sort of, they are, the identity of the sender is not listed and they end up in my spam. So if you check your spam, yeah, they're not really, whoever's sending them does not want their identity known, I guess. It comes from an app, Proton Mail.
All right, and so that's why some people aren't seeing them. Let me go ahead and forward those to Mr. Hayes. And if everybody can check their spam, they might see that. Let me also, I can, the reason why I will say I like to have permission from people before I forward their email that comes to me. I asked the chair of the tribe whether I could forward that email to you, and I did not receive confirmation. That letter was then forwarded to everyone else via a Proton email account, and I didn't catch that it only went to the school, the emails that were listed in the directory for the schools. So both of those emails hopefully are in your inbox. If not, please message me and I will forward them to you so that you can see them. I will also note that I want to take the opportunity to clear a few sort of issues up that were raised in the agenda or in some of these letters. One that I will say, right, we have been complying with open meeting law with respect to access to these meetings, right? The act that I just cited allows us us to meet virtually so long as the meeting can be accessed via live stream, right, to the public. The second thing that I will say, that while it is generally good practice to have public comment periods, public comment periods are not required at meetings, right? They are purely optional. So whether or not we have public comment at any one of our meetings is open to us to decide. It has to be posted on the agenda if we are doing that, and we can have a conversation about whether we want to do that, but that is not required by law. I just want to make you and the public aware of this. So let me ask, and let me have the opportunity, has everyone received those 2 letters? I want to be sure that everyone has received them.
I am finding the one from Jacob Ventura and that group, but I don't see the other one in my email.
Okay, so that was the one, to Kathleen's point, that probably got caught in the spam. So let me see if I can forward that one to you all. All right, so Kelly, you said you didn't. Who else? Diane?
Yes, I just checked and I did not.
Okay.
Receive it. Thank
So
you.
let's see, I've added Kelly, Diane, Lily. Who else needs to see that one? Us, maybe you and Dr. Gifford and I have like lower level spam filters that everything comes.
Mm,
I don't know. We'll have to ask Mr. Galashaw. All right. So I think forwarded that to you. All right. So all of the members of the committee may have that. All right. So that I wanted to have at least have you all have access to that for our meeting so we can talk about our next steps, right? Because the people in the letters have asked for several things, and I have received other emails that have asked for us to have a public comment period. I have told people who have emailed me directly that that's not my decision to make, right? I am the chair of the committee, but this is the committee, and this is something that we have to discuss as a committee. So there are several issues that were raised in the letters that I just want to highlight for your attention, right? One was the question about whether or not we want to have public comment surrounding this issue. I would say the second issue that was raised was regarding input from other tribal neighbors, shall we speak. The Gay Head Wampanoag have asked to provide input and to be consulted on this issue. They have expressed willingness to keep the mascot and to work with the town to keep the mascot. I will also note that, again, as part of this, we on the school committee have also received communication from other tribes. I have, and I don't know, maybe Ms. Amaral has, but there have been other communication from other tribes on this issue. So for instance, the Pocasset Wampanoag, a member of their tribal council, did contact us and let it be known that they were not in support of keeping the mascot. There are other local tribes, including the Mashpee Wampanoag, the Ponkapog, Massachusetts, and I'm not sure which of the Nipmuc tribes, who have written letters supporting the state bill banning mascots. So I just want to be clear that we have seen and received, right, input from a variety of different sort of tribes, some of whom who have different positions on this issue. With that sort of foregrounding of our discussion, I think there are some questions we need to sort of answer about or have a conversation about, which we have to wait till now in open meeting, about what we want to do in terms of next steps. We talked at last meeting some options of simply sort of moving forward with a recommendation to the full school committee. We as a subcommittee could have more hearings, right? We could invite sort of representatives, or we could contact representatives from other tribes. We could hold public comments as a committee. We could also recommend that the school committee hold those additional hearings, right? So there are plenty of options open for us to consider. But again, I think we as a committee had wanted to let the public know we will be talking about those tonight. And so now is our chance for you all to share your thoughts on these matters. So I will take any input or thoughts that anyone has about how we want to proceed from here?
I do think it's important to hear different voices. We've heard primarily one perspective so far, I think, from our speakers and some of the information that we've read. And it would be good to kind of open the discussion up and make sure we are hearing different perspectives and different voices. I worry about opening the parameters too much, to a complete public comment, because I think that could get a little out of control. So I'm not sure how we set limits on that. I also think it's important to, and I don't know how we determine this either, but I imagine there could be very many Native American perspectives, for instance, within one tribe, as well as there could be very many Caucasian perspectives, or any group. So it's important to kind of figure out what are individual perspectives and what is maybe the leadership of the tribe or the leadership of the, National Congress of American Indians, or the leaderships of different groups, what their perspectives are, But I would like to open it up to hearing a little more perspectives, I would say.
Okay. Other thoughts? Mr. Tebow.
So I agree with this committee is about equality and diversity, and I think, inclusion. And so it wouldn't make sense to me to not include the voices of various constituencies within the, or various stakeholders within the community. That being said, I do wonder if it wouldn't be best managed at a full school committee meeting. As you've made the point at previous meetings, we're really just going to make a recommendation to the school committee, and ultimately it's going to be the school committee that's going to have to take a decisive vote on any action, if there is action to take. So I do wonder if it's not best to have any kind of open forum or public comment in that venue as opposed to in this working group.
I'll say a couple of things related to that, right? Generally speaking, the school committee does have a public comment period when items are on our agenda. So by definition, anytime the school committee takes up this issue, right, there will be a public forum and public comment. That's not to say we shouldn't do it. But that's also to say that if we did one, right, we would also then, by definition, also have another one. So it would be a second opportunity for, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean? So we could do one, listen to voices, make a recommendation that would go to the school committee. And then because it was on the school committee's agenda, it would then be open for public comment again. So we could do both. We could just do one. I just want to make sure that everyone's aware of that. Go ahead, Mr. Tebow.
So along those lines, then I wonder if it wouldn't make sense. Correct me if I'm wrong. We invited Kempton Campbell and Dr. Is it Delaney Davis? Delano Davis? I forget her name. I apologize.
Yes.
But we invited those two speakers, right? So I wonder if we don't invite the leadership that has reached out to us to have the same kind of window of time, the 10 minutes to present their side or their perspective on it. I wonder if that makes sense.
Sure. One of the things that I was thinking along the lines of sort of Miss Bloom's, like, how do we sort of control, right? It could be a public comment. We set the parameters on how public comment works because we're not required to do it. So we can set time limits on speakers. We can set an overall time limit on the public comment. But we could invite the letter writers and give them sort of what we might call a privilege placed in the public comment session, where they would have 5 to 10 minutes to speak. But then we could say, all right, aside from these speakers that we have designated, everyone else gets no more than 2 minutes, right? So we can establish rules for public comment. And there is nothing that requires that this seems ironic to say this, right? Because we're the equality committee, but there isn't a rule that requires everyone be given equal time. So if we give the people who wrote the letter, say 10 minutes, the equal amount, that doesn't mean we have to give everyone else 10 minutes, if that makes sense. So would we like to schedule like another meeting / session where we can allow people to come? We would allow, I think what I'm hearing from the committee is we'd like to allow the people who sent us letters some time to voice their opinion, an equal amount of time, say 10 minutes. We might reserve the rest of the meeting, right, for other public comment. The big question that I have and that I am wrestling with is that I agree with Miss Andrews Maltese, I think. I want to make sure I'm getting her name right. Miss Andrews Maltese, that we ought to listen to our tribal neighbors, right? But there are other tribes, right, in the region. And I guess my question is, do we want to do one session that's public comment, or do we want to do two sessions when we hear, where one we hear from sort of tribal leaders, members, and another that's more public comment, or do we just want to do one? I don't know how we might want to do that. Ms. Scott, you're saying two. Ms. Chamberlain, your thoughts?
I feel it would be good. Does my sound okay? It sounds kind of weird from this end. Does it sound all right?
Yep, it's okay.
Okay. I feel like maybe we could do another session where we invited some people to do a Zoom session like this, and we could listen to what those people have to say. And then maybe I feel like people were requesting that we had an in-person session. So maybe we could have an in-person session where anybody could show up and make a comment. And I agree, like 2 minutes or something like that. And I would also ask that people not be debating each other, but just that they go up and make a statement for 2 minutes and really not be arguing with the person that came before that. I don't really know how we can enforce that, but I mean, I've done that in my classes and the kids pretty much, they do it, you know? So I think if you tell them that's what they need to do, that's what they'll do, you know?
Right. Other thoughts, Ms. Scott?
I agree with what Ms. Chamberlain just suggested. I'm also wondering if we can encourage and make clear how to access the materials that have been referenced, like the race, ethnicity, and education article, so that folks that are presenting to us in that first meeting that Lily mentioned, we can all sort of have the same background information and reference that as we're moving forward. Clearly, the folks that have been watching the recorded previous meetings, you know, are aware of everything that was said by the presenters. And since there's also written material that's been provided to us, I think it would be important that it be provided to them so that we're all working from the same source of information. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I have to figure out, I have to work with Mr. Galashat to figure out how we need to, we can have authorship, but we can't open that to everyone to have authorship. If
Right.
that makes sense. I need to figure that out, how to share that. Let me ask a question for you. Ms. Chamberlain proposed one Zoom session and one in-person session. Would we, so the Zoom session, so I'm trying to think about this. Like, in my sense is, maybe the committee doesn't agree with me, but I feel like if we're going to invite sort of tribal representatives to share their thoughts, that meeting should just be those people, and it could be positive or negative. We know that the Gayhead Wampanoag would like to retain, but I feel like there should be a meeting just for us to listen to our tribal neighbors, right? And then we've also discussed that we'd like to invite Mr. Pereira perhaps, or Mr. Ventura, or I believe the other, right, was Mr. Andrews to come, would we invite them to the public forum and then give them a little bit longer to speak? I don't know. I'm not sure what our thinking is on that. Ms. Massari.
I like your idea just because I'm thinking time and just, the nature of the speakers, just to give them the time. And then if we have questions for them, and then I just think it would be too much to have it all one meeting personally. Because it is a sensitive topic. It's been, hot topic. And I just think that just to be fair and given the time, and then like Ms. Chamberlain had said, to set those parameters when we do have it open. I think it's just important to have the voices heard, and that, they know that we're taking this seriously and being considerate on the matter.
So then would it make sense to have our next meeting be a Zoom meeting and try to arrange that with tribal representatives? And then we would schedule another meeting after that, that hopefully, I can't say for certain, Dr. Gifford, we're going to talk about this on the 26th, I think, about reopening public access to school committee meetings. So we think we're going to do that, and we should be able, because I'll be honest too, I don't want to try to manage public comment period over a Zoom. I would much prefer to do it in person. So perhaps we could do another Zoom meeting. We can work to engage some tribal representatives to come talk to us, maybe a little less limited where they can talk and we can do some back and forth. And then a second meeting would be an in-person meeting. We might invite, again, Mr. Pereira, Mr. Ventura, or Mr. Andrews to speak at that meeting and give them a little bit more time than the 2 minutes, but then other agenda speakers would have certain limits that we agreed to. Does that sound about right to people? Ms. Scott.
I just wanted to try to clarify. So the Zoom meeting would involve all tribal leadership that want to share their point of view on the topic. But the authors of the letter, while 2 out of 3 of them are members of the Wampanoag tribe of Gayhead, because they're not tribal leadership, they would be included in the second meeting in person for public comments, but be given additional time.
Yeah, I don't know. That's what I think we're discussing, right?
Okay.
Is the Zoom meeting for tribal representatives? Is it for anyone who is a tribal member, right? What are the
Mhm.
parameters for that meeting? Because to your point, right, we could ask Mr. Andrews or Mr. Ventura to present also at if we opened it up to anyone who is a member of a tribe, right?
Right.
Ms. Murphy, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just thinking, I guess I was thinking of it differently, in that maybe we would go first with the response invitation for those who had written letters and asked for an audience, so to speak, on Zoom, and then possibly think about how to deal with the tribal leaders. I'm still thinking about when we heard from Dr. Davis Delano and also from some of the other things that I have watched other towns go through this process live on Zoom, as well as some of the lobbying around the state bills. And there is a lot of caution and suggestion that we not try to, rush through the tribal leaders or try to bring them in and not really have a plan for, is a vote going to be happening or when a vote is going to be happening and things like that. We really do want to be careful about respecting time and space and all those things. So I'm just not sure what kind of response we're going to get if we send out an email invitation to different leaders without like a clear understanding for them on what's we expect to happen next and what the timeline is.
Yeah, and that's, I would say that's, why I think it's important to keep the two meetings separate. The order is, but I think it may be disrespectful to invite, right, our tribal partners in and to have a big sort of, free-flowing discussion, that I think we want to have that space just for them. I think you raise a good point that perhaps we might want to invert that perhaps we do have a public listening session and, invite Mr. Pereira. I don't think Mr. Ventura is local, so if we did an in-person session, I think it might likely be Mr. Pereira, but they can sort of work that out. We could invite them to that and allow for some public comment. And then it may be to be sort of sensitive to your point, Ms. Murphy, to say that we might then say to the school committee, we've listened to, the side in support, we've listened to side against, we recommend that the school committee hold a session inviting tribal leaders in anticipation of a vote. That's the other way to do it. What are your thoughts on that? Do we want to have a public comment session first? And then consultation with tribal leaders later, and also inviting the full school committee? Or do we want to try to invite tribal leaders first and then do the public comment after? Ms. Murphy.
Sorry. I would just add, I don't know if anyone had a chance to watch the very long public session that I believe it was the Wakefield School Committee held this spring. I would just add for the record that they brought in a very large group of tribal leaders, which took a lot of coordination over like several months, I believe, to get them all there at the same time. And when the evening, which was super intense, concluded, the school committee was planning then to do a public survey and public comment and things like that afterwards. And just, I think you can probably go back and watch it. It's probably available somewhere, but that was widely received among the tribal leaders as, I guess I would say disrespectful and not well thought out. So I would just voice again that that's something that we want to think about. It felt very much after the evidence and statement after statement was made, and on both sides of the issue, it wasn't an entirely one-sided discussion. That then to say, okay, now we're going to open this up to public opinion, did feel uncomfortable at best. So I would just say we want to keep that in mind.
So it sounds like, Ms. Murphy, you're advocating for, right, doing public comment first, right, having that meeting, that session, and then doing maybe reporting to the school committee and recommending that they do a session with tribal leaders, inviting the committee along with them. Other thoughts on that plan? Is that preferable to doing? We have the Zoom with tribal leaders, that in-person public comment option, or public comment sort of option, and then tribal leaders with the full school committee. Those are our two options we have before us right now. Mr. Hayes and then Ms. Chamberlain.
So pretty quickly, I just think that, my thought would be that the more information that we're able to disseminate before public comment, like the more that we're able to, in a controlled manner, disseminate information to everyone before people start to make public comment in a manner that could be considered less controlled, I think the better. From my opinion, I haven't had an opportunity to view the Wakefield School Committee meetings or any of that, but as a general perspective, I think the more controlled information I shouldn't say controlled information, but the more we're able to get information out in a controlled manner before the public comment, I think could be helpful.
Thank you, Ms. Chamberlain. You were going to add some thoughts?
I just feel a little bit like what Mr. Tebow was saying before about like, I would like the public comments to be heard by the school committee who are going to be making the decision, not us. And I just wonder if maybe both of these meetings shouldn't be going in front of the school committee and not us. That's just what I'm wondering.
It's a good question. I will say ultimately, again, I'll just go back to my point that when this comes up on the school committee agenda, there will be public comment at that point too. So we might look at it as not necessarily harmful to have two opportunities for the public to provide input, once to us and once to the school committee. Alternatively, you might say that's inefficient, right? And I don't know, right? I'm not sure about that. I mean, I guess the other question is whether or not sort of we've reached the limits on what we can do as a committee. But it seems at the same point in time to be a little, I don't know the word I'm looking for. Like we're not doing our job by just saying, okay, we listened a little and we can't do anything and we've got to push it back to you, which is, I guess, personally, in my opinion, I think I'd like to have that public comment, right? So at least we've heard sort of from the perspective of wanting to get rid of the mascot, will allow, I would say the letter writers to have the same amount of time at the beginning of that public comment, and then to hear some other thoughts related to that, so that we then as a committee can at least say, we believe that the final word should be that you hear from tribal leaders and the school committee makes a decision. But as a committee, this is our recommendation after hearing from both sides. Like, I feel like one of the things the school committee has charged us with is making a recommendation on this issue. And so to say, oh, you do all the meetings, right? Shirks our charge a bit. So I think I would personally be inclined to do a meeting that's open to public comment. And then after that, we can have another discussion about making a recommendation to the school committee. That would be my personal preference. So I think I'm agreeing with Ms. Murphy here that we should do the public comment first and then start potentially making arrangements for sometime in the fall to do something with the school committee. But I'm open to other opinions. This is not my decision, it's our decision. Ms. Scott.
I like that idea. And I'm wondering regarding the letter from Mr. Andrews, Pereira, and Ventura, would we put a 10-minute limit on that? Or would we, because they're citing quite heavily from our previous presenters. I'm wondering if it would be more equitable if we allowed them similar presentation time if they need it.
Yeah, so we had told those presenters 10 to 15 minutes.
Okay.
But I would tell them the same thing.
Right.
And so I guess I would say maybe that perhaps the structure of this meeting would be 10 to 15 minutes for we've received that letter, the other sort of position. And then we would allow for some public comment with parameters. So, right, we could say to Ms. Chamberlain's point, and Ms. Bloom has said this too, we should have some structure, like maybe we tell people that you have 2 minutes to make comments. What I've often seen, this is sort of town meeting, anyone who's been to town meeting, right? You're not debating each other, right? You're making a comment about the policy question at hand. We like to ask people, right, to try to make new points, right? To not continue to make the same point over and over, but people get to say. The other thing that we can do is we can set a limit on the total time that we are going to have public comment. So we could have, you know, Mr. Pereira, Mr. Ventura, Mr. Andrews, right? Have 10 to 15 minutes at the beginning, have some time for question and answer. And then we could say an hour of public comment, right? At 2 minutes per person, right? Those parameters are up to us. We can say we'll stay until the cows go home and hear everyone, or we can say we are going to listen for an hour and everyone has 2 minutes. If we get done before that, then fine, but if we at 1 hour, we'll be done. So the one sort of wrench in this plan is, I think we would all agree that I think a public comment period would be preferable in person. I don't know, maybe I'm looking at some of the teachers who had to teach online this year and thinking maybe they got Zoom skills that are better than me trying to manage this, but I'm just trying to get the public into a Zoom and making sure we don't get Zoom bombed and all of that, I think is just a little too much, particularly on an issue like this. So I think we would want to do the public comment in person. The school committee is going to meet on July 26th to discuss when we will resume in-person, right, meetings. I have some suspicion that we will be resuming that soon. I can't say for certain though, because I haven't talked to anyone about it. We're not allowed to talk about it until we go into open meeting. So that having been said, if our consensus is to have a public comment period, do we want to tentatively schedule a date, working on the assumption that the school committee is going to say, yes, we can allow the public back in? Alternatively, we could come up with we could meet again. I don't think we want to meet again. I think it seems better to pick a date now and cross our fingers, right? So the other, I would say, I guess, complicating factor, right, is so the school committee is meeting on the 26th, and then we get into August, and I don't know about you all, but that seems to be prime vacation time, like people are away. Do we want to try to set something up in August? What is everyone's thoughts about timing on a public meeting? Alternatively, it may be better before we get into the crush of, you know, new school meetings and this and that and sports. So maybe sometime later in August might not be bad. Ms. Scott, I'm seeing a thumbs down face from you. It's okay.
I will certainly accommodate what's best for the committee in the town of Dartmouth. The end of August is a busy time, but that is very specific to
That's
my
right.
job.
Because you're doing orientation, so.
But that's okay. I
The good
can
news is
manage my time.
Well, Mr. Parati will probably be there to tape it for us, so you can watch it, you know, as a way to decompress after orientation. You know, so then my other, you know, I have to go away for part of August. I think Dr. Gifford, you're away for part of August too, if I remember correctly, right? What about the week of the 23rd of August?
I'm going to be out of town that week, but I could watch it on whatever.
I'm going to be traveling for school as well.
Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3 people. We could move it earlier, but I would have to be like the 18th or 19th. Does that work for people? About the 18th of August? Okay. So our plan is, let me sort of see if we're coming to some agreement that on the 18th of August, we will have a public comment sort of session on about the issue. At the beginning of that session, we'll ask Mr. Ventura, Mr. Pereira, and/or Mr. Andrews to speak for 10 to 15 minutes about their letter, similar amount of time to our other presenters. And then after that initial presentation, we will open it up for additional public comment. We will ask that people who are giving public comment limit themselves to 2 minutes. Do we want to set an overall limit on the amount of time we're there for public comment? An hour and a half? What are your thoughts on that? Or anything that I've just said? I don't think any of you are here till midnight, so I'm inclined to set some sort of limit on it, right? The question is, what is the appropriate limit?
I mean, I would like everybody to get a chance to say what they want to say, you know, but on the other hand, I don't want to be there till midnight either. I don't think it will be, but I would say maybe like an hour and a half.
I was thinking an hour and a half too. I have a question. Just, I know sometimes at different forums and conferences and stuff, there is an attempt to get sort of like a pro-con switch back and forth. Like, is there an attempt to do that? Or if you line up first, those people get to go? How do you typically manage this type of stuff?
Whoever lines up at the podium first, typically is how we have done it. I'm not sure. I'm sort of looking at Dr. Gifford on this, trying to think. I'm not sure there's any way we would be able to manage it otherwise.
No, we've always just had folks line up. And obviously we've never had a whole lot, as you know, in the past. Usually it's over budgets.
Right.
I mean, I know from like having given testimony like in the state legislature before and stuff like that, they do ask in advance so that they can sort of reach both sides.
Yeah. I understand your point, right? You don't want everyone on one side of the issue to show up early, line up first, and then it's not a balanced sort of representation of what the public stands. I'll be honest with you, if someone would like to try to manage that, that would be great. I do not have the capacity to take that on right now. And that I think is the big issue, like who or how we would manage that. The advantage of just first come, first serve is we don't have to manage it. I'm not a state legislator. I don't have staff available to me to help with that. So, and I know our school staff is, if they're not busy, they're taking a rest because they haven't had a rest in like 20 months. So I hesitate to burden them with extra tasks. Ms. Scott.
I'm familiar with what Ms. Murphy suggests because I recently attended a meeting where a professional on Robert's rules was involved. And that's exactly what they did. They asked people if they were for or against the measure that was being discussed, and they would have each person go back and forth. They didn't register in advance. It was done on Zoom, but they, I'm sure, paid for this professional to come in.
I just had an idea now that you said that, Ms. Scott. I'm going to ask Dr. Gifford this. Could we set up 2 podiums? Right, and so we could have 2 separate podiums where one podium you go and if you're in support of keeping the mascot, and the other podium you go if you're against it, and we can just switch back and forth between the podiums. And if you go to the wrong one, you don't get 2 minutes.
I was going to say that
right there, right? So
that's the low tech way of doing it, and it does tend to work. Yeah.
do you think we could make that happen, Dr. Gifford, Mr.
Of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So let's try to do that. And Mr. Parati said he can help us out with that. So we'll do it low tech. We'll set up 2 podiums. We'll alternate between the podiums. There'll be different sides of the issue. 2 minutes per presenter, aside from our first presenters, with an hour and a half overall limit. Does that seem right to everyone? Okay, and so we will schedule this for August 18th. I'm going to recommend we do a 6:30 start just for people who are working. And this is tentative because we are waiting for confirmation from the school committee that we can do in-person events. I will let you know if that is not the case and we have to change the date. Does that make sense?
Where would it be?
Most likely at the high school. The high school is set up for meetings and we have the capacity to do the streaming and the broadcasting and all of that there. Does that work for everyone? Are there other issues that we want to discuss related to next steps, or is this sort of good? So I will reach out to Mr. Pereira, Mr. Ventura, and Mr. Andrews. I want to say Andrews, but I think it is Mr. Andrews. Okay. To extend that invitation to them to attend that meeting. People will be able to see it if they're watching this meeting, and that meeting will be publicly posted so people know they can attend that meeting. Does that work for everyone? Okay, awesome. Are there other
Should we think about the tribal leaders that we're going to want to invite to a meet? Well, not us, but I don't know. Should we start like reaching out or thinking about a date, or is that really for the school committee to decide?
I think that's probably something for the school committee to decide. I will bring that up at our meeting on the 26th. And have a conversation with the full school committee about that. I'm looking, I mean, Ms. Amaral, what your thoughts are on that. That's probably something the school committee will discuss and maybe work on. But it may,
I think so.
yeah, if the school committee decides to do that, we may come back and ask the members of the committee to help us do some outreach. I don't know. We'll have to figure that one out after a discussion on the 26th. That's a good question, Ms. Chamberlain. Other questions, comments, concerns? Ms. Scott.
Just another wish that we could encourage everyone that would be attending the public comment meeting to acquaint themselves with the materials, especially the research on the impacts that has been shared with us, just so that we all have the same knowledge base. I know we can't make people do that, but if we can make a path and let them know that this is really, it would be helpful, maybe that would help.
Yeah, Mr. Hayes brought that point up too. So thank you for reminding me of that. I have sort of those two action items, setting up that meeting. And I will speak with Mr. Galashaw. I think we may just be able to share the Google Doc. You all are editors, but we may be able to make that publicly available. And we might be able to share it, on social media and other places. So yeah, we can do that. And I'll work with Mr. Parati and Mr. Galashaw to figure out sort of the best way to make that information publicly available. I will also say though, remember that if any of you find any information that you all are also authors of that document or editors, so you do have the ability to share any information that you might find that you would like. But the general public will just be able to look and view that. So, and as a reminder, sort of open meeting, it's not a place to discuss, debate, or whatever. It's a place to share resources, files, links, things like that. Does that make sense? Okay, any other questions, comments, concerns before we go?
I have a question.
Boom.
After we kind of hand this over to the school committee to schedule a meeting with some Native American tribal leadership to speak, are we still going to then make a recommendation to the school committee about what our thoughts are as a committee?
So I think, the big question that we'll have to tackle, whether we do that at the end of the public comment, maybe we might discuss next steps at the end of that, is whether we want to make a recommendation first to the school committee. I think we should, I think to Ms. Murphy's point, right, that the tribal leaders wanted to know that there was a vote and that there was a plan for action, and that's what they were being asked to comment on. So it might make sense for us after the public comment period to make our recommendation and also accompany that, tell the school committee that we recommend that they also schedule a meeting with tribal leaders. That's just my 2 cents, though. We could do it differently. But my sense from talking to Miss Davis Delano and Miss Murphy, I think you got this from watching that video, was that the tribal leaders and the community felt like they wanted to be proximate to the actual decision, right? Not like it would go here and then it would go back there and then it would go here. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it does make sense. It's just that we got that letter, from the gay head group that they felt like they were not happy that they haven't been included in any conversations yet. So I know that that's what Miss Davis Delano said, was to try to invite the tribal leaders if you were close to making a decision. But I feel like maybe some of the tribal leaders feel like they're being left out of the conversation, even though we haven't really had that many meetings, but they may still feel that way. I just don't know.
Yeah, I will say this, right, that there's a tension here, right? On the one hand, right, you have tribal leaders who want to be consulted. On the other hand, there's the argument that, right, we shouldn't ask oppressed people if they feel comfortable with their oppression, right? Because if you're oppressed, how do you answer that question, right? Do you say, gee, no, my oppression is fine. I have right? That's no big deal. There's no answer to that. So there's a tension, right? There are some members of tribal communities who wish to be consulted, and there are some members of tribal communities who feel it is offensive to be consulted on this issue. And so we have to balance that, right? And so I think I don't know the answer to that question, right? I don't, right? And so, my sense is, right, we have heard from the Gay Head Wampanoag. I will also know I will reiterate, we have heard from other tribes, right? The Pocahontas Wampanoag, have contacted the school committee to voice their opposition to the mascot. I will also reiterate that the Pocahontas Wampanoag, I cannot talk this evening, their tribal lands are Dartmouth, all right? They lay claim to Dartmouth as part of, and I will ask, Megan Running Deer Page sent the school committee an email about this issue. I will ask her permission to forward that to you. They claim under treaties, right, that these are part of their tribal lands. So tribal views about, right, sort of input are not universal, right? And there's a question and debate over whose voice should have, right, sort of most proximity to the issue, right? Is it tribal members who live in Dartmouth? Is it all tribes? Is it tribes who lay claim to Dartmouth lands? These are not easy questions to answer. right? And so I hesitate to, right, give weight to say the position of one tribe is in fact the position of all tribes about how we ought to operate here. And so I don't know, my sense would be that we should move that closer and have the school commit to the decision and the school committee, but there are certainly differences of opinion on that. Ms. Scott.
Clarification, the letters that we received today and the letter that you just referenced, would those be made available for the public to read as well?
We can make those available because they were sent to official school committee emails. They are part of sort of, I don't want to say the public record, right? But they are, right? Anything you work at UMass, anything that comes to official emails, the public can request to see. I certainly think we can make it easier for the public to see those letters rather than saying, oh, you have to do a Freedom of Information request. So perhaps we could put those letters up on our Google Drive for people to see. That may be one thing that we could do. Ms. Murphy.
And I believe that one of the resources that Dr. Davis Delano had shared at some point in the last month or so actually includes a website where there are 5 tribes whose leadership have come forth and written letters in support of the mascot ban in the state legislature. And one of those, I believe, is the Pocasset that's available there. It's a similar.
Yes, the Pocasset Wampanoag have written a letter, the tribe, in support of the state bill banning mascots. So have the Nipmuc tribe, the Ponkapog, Massachusetts tribe has also put a letter there. The Mashpee Wampanoag, which I will note is the other federally recognized tribe, has submitted a letter supporting the state bill banning native mascots. The Herring Pond Wampanoag have also submitted a letter, and maybe also the Chappaquiddick Wampanoag, but I'm not 100% confident on that. But to Ms. Murphy's point, that link is there, and you can go to that website and see the letters from those tribes in support of the state bill banning mascots. So I think I would summarize by saying I think it's pretty fair to say that we know the positions of most of the tribes in the communities surrounding us, right? The difficult question is, right, what is the appropriate way to solicit tribal input? And there are differences of opinion among tribes about the appropriate way to go about doing that. And so what we have to do is to figure out what we're comfortable with and what seems to work for us. So I will say this too, at the after next meeting, right, we may end up, again, this is one of the difficulties of having this be a meeting, committee meeting subject to open meeting law. It may be that we want to have another meeting like this afterwards, after public comment, to say, all right, what's our next step, right? Because that's the only time we can really do that. And I don't know about you all, but when I get a bunch of information and presentations, I'm not ready to make a decision right then. Like I often have to stew on it and think about it and parse through what I've learned. So that may be, right, we have this meeting and then we have another meeting to decide if we make a recommendation, whether we recommend to invite tribal leaders, whether we invite that. Maybe we don't have to make that decision tonight, but that's something maybe we can all think about. Does that make sense for everyone? Other comments, questions, concerns? Ms. Murphy.
Sorry, one more thing, just because of this is open meeting and I'm not fully comfortable with that. So aware of the nuances, I suppose.
Right.
So I'm not going to send a follow-up email to ask this question.
Right.
But I'm just thinking in terms of, because we did already do the first meeting with Kempton Campbell and Dr. Davis Delano, I think we want to make sure that we set up the introduction to this next meeting, which will likely have more than 4 people watching on YouTube or in person, as the case may be, that a brief summary of what happened there, so that it doesn't appear to people like we're only bringing in Mr. Pereira and his people. Like we need to make sure that that's all clear how we got to this point to set up what happens then.
Sure, I can do that. Unless anyone else wants to volunteer to do that. But I would be happy to sort of start up that meeting with a little summary of where we are before they present. Other comments, questions, concerns? All right, if not, I think we have a plan of attack, how we're going to move forward, right? We've discussed our next steps and we have some next steps. Is there anything else that anyone wants to discuss? So I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved.
Miss Murphy move, and Mr. Tebow, I'll take that as a second.
Second, yeah.
All right, so now I need to roll call. Sorry, Miss Bloom,
Here.
Miss Chamberlain,
Yes.
Miss Masari,
Yes.
Mr. Hayes,
Yes.
Mr. Tebow,
Yes.
Ms. Scott,
Yes.
Miss Murphy,
Yes.
Ms. Amaral,
Yes.
Ms. Walker,
Yes.
and I am also a yes. Thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate you turning out in the summer. Have a great evening.
You too.
Thanks, you too.
Thank you.